video we're going to be making Szechuan eggplant. It's one of those popular, iconic, local Hawaii dishes, and it has one of my favorite ingredients, eggplant. To start, we have some fresh ground pork that I'm going to be adding a little bit of sherry wine in here, and I have some soy sauce that's going to go in. And what we're going to do is mix it together so that it can marinate the pork. Now, while I'm putting this together, you can see here we have a bowl that has the eggplant that's cut up, and the eggplant is actually soaking in salt water. What I wanted to do is find a way to make this dish that tastes delicious, and sometimes when you go to restaurants, the eggplant's really kind of soggy or mushy. So I did a couple versions. First, I just cooked it straight with the eggplant after I cut it, and it was a little, it was mushy. Then I did a version where a lot of people do is they'll take the eggplant, they'll cut it, and they'll salt it to try to pull out extra moisture. And it improved the texture, but the result was really salty because of all that salt that you put on there. And so the third version was I did the eggplant, I cut it up, and then I made a quick brine solution, and the brine solution has salt and water. And basically I cured it for 20 minutes, and then we're gonna pour that out. And I wanna make sure that after I pour the liquid out, I pat it really, really dry so that there's not a lot of splatting. Just real quick to show you the eggplant prep. I cut the tip off, I split it down the center. And if you notice, I'm using local Hawaii grown. These are the sort of Asian or Japanese eggplant. They're long and skinny. This is typically what you're gonna get in a restaurant. If you're making this and all you can get is the globe eggplants, which are round, that's perfectly fine too, but you may have a lot of seed or core. One of the things I like is the skin, so it's just gonna change the dish a little bit, but you still can have a satisfactory result using those globe eggplants. And so these are the sizes that we're cutting. If it was really fat and round, I might quarter it, but these are skinny, so I'm gonna go halves. Put these on the side. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is get the sauce ready. Typically when you see Chinese dishes, there's a sauce and it's kind of lightly thick and it glazes and makes the dish very shiny. It's because it's a combination usually of a brown sauce that is made or another kind of sauce that they're using, but it's usually a broth or water base with either soy or oyster sauce and cornstarch. So what I'm going to do here is I have some cornstarch and chicken stock, and I'm going to add it in here. Now, what's important in this is I'm adding the liquid to the cornstarch as opposed to adding the cornstarch to the liquid. And that's important because if you were just to take the cornstarch and dump it into the liquid, what happens is all of that starch kind of starts to dissolve. It holds together and it goes in the liquid surrounds it, and then the outside starts to dissolve, but then it clumps up that way. In this application, I'm adding the liquid into the starch, and the starch is still a higher percentage to liquid, so it'll mix it better. And gradually, once it's all stirred in, I can add the rest. I can add the rest of my broth, or I can go back into the master. But you don't want to just go, you don't want to pour the cornstarch directly into the liquid, or else you're going to get lots of clumps, okay? Here we have, this is our apple cider vinegar, and you can use apple cider vinegar or balsamic vinegar. I also have a little bit of sugar that's going to go into here so it can dissolve. And then we're just going to let that sit. Okay, so we have everything ready. We've got our marinated pork, we've got our eggplant on the side here that's been drying out, and I've got my sauce ready. We have a few more ingredients that are going to go in the dish, and the next piece is to get the pan really, really hot. Now the recipe calls for a wok, and I'm going to be using a pan here. The reason I'm using the pan is because it's going to be easier for you to see what's happening, but I think the other important thing is that it shows that you can make this dish with a pan and get very good results, okay? For starters, I'm going to add a little bit of canola oil into the pan. And we're going to let that kind of heat up. Typically in wok cooking, the reason, what's important about wok cooking is you're using really, really high heat and you're flash cooking. So to replicate that, I need to make sure that the pan here is really, really hot. So I'm going to get it very, very, very screaming hot, and I'm looking for wisps of smoke. Once that starts happening, then we're gonna start immediately going into the frying process. We're gonna be adding some chili. I have chili bean paste that we're gonna be using. We have fresh ginger and garlic, and I have a little bit of oyster sauce that I'm gonna be putting into the pan, and we're gonna get it fragrant. And as soon as it becomes fragrant, then we're gonna add the pork, and we're gonna get that all cooked up. So I'm gonna start here with a chili bean paste. I'm gonna add my chili bean paste here. We're gonna add the ginger and garlic. And I'm trying to get all the flavors out. I'm trying to get the essential oils. Okay, next is gonna go in the pork. And right now, if you were here, you could smell the ginger, you can smell the garlic and the chilies. It's really very fragrant. And you want to break it up while you're doing this, okay? What's really important when you're doing this dish here, especially when you're doing the pork, is you want to get the pan really hot, like I said. If it was not hot, as soon as I put the pork in, it would immediately start to sweat and all the liquid would come out and you wouldn't get any browning on here. Okay, now I'm going to take the pork out, I'm going to clean the pan, and we'll come back and we're going to start the next phase. Okay, next step. We got the pan back, I cleaned it up. It's very hot, I'm going to add more canola oil. And when you're doing the eggplant, you might want to put a little bit more than you think you need, because eggplant's really like a sponge. And so it'll suck up all that oil really fast. I have a towel here, and this is what I've been drying all of the eggplant on to get all that moisture out. And here we go. We're gonna put this in. What's nice about the dish is when you make this, I've noticed I'm putting the skin side down. I'm gonna let it sit in the pan, and I want it to actually char the skin. What's gonna happen is by charring the skin, it's gonna give the dish a nice smoky flavor. And when you think of the components in the dish, we've got sugar, we've got sweetness from the oyster sauce, and a little bit from the chili paste, and we added vinegar, right? And so you have a sort of a sweet sour flavor, and what complements those two flavors very well is a nice smokiness. And you can see the eggplant starting to soften up in the pan here. And I'm starting to smell some of that smokiness. As you can see here, you can kind of see where the piece is touching the pan. It's got a nice little charring on there, okay? I also want you to know that I put everything in the pan and then I stopped and we're just hanging out a little bit because I want the pan to cook. A lot of times you put something in the pan and you think that cooking means shaking the pan, and you're just really disrupting everything. So now that it's been charring, I'm now gonna toss it, okay? And you can see more of those charred pieces here. And I'm gonna let it sit a little bit, then I'll toss it again, and the eggplant will start to cook and break down. When I feel like it's 3/4 cooked, then we're gonna add the rest of the pork and then we'll finish the dish. But the key thing on the dish that I tried to create here was something that has wonderful tender eggplant, but not mushy eggplant. So eggplant's one of those things that's really delicious, but it has to be cooked all the way through. But the tricky part is trying to get an eggplant that's tender, that still has structure in it. So we're pretty close now. I'm gonna go ahead and add the pork back. And all of the flavors are starting to come together. You can really smell all of the different elements that were put in coming out in the dish. Now we have our sauce. And what I want to make sure you do before you use it is you need to stir it back again. because the cornstarch will have a tendency to settle down, and you want to make sure it's not all stuck in the bottom. Now I'm gonna let this finish cooking. I turned it down to low heat. I'm gonna let it finish cooking the eggplant through. I want it to be cooked through but not mushy. And I'm gonna start getting the garnish ready. We've got green onions we're gonna use for garnish. So I'm gonna slice some of that up right now. I'm actually gonna throw some into the dish, and then we're gonna add some for garnish at the end as well. Okay, I think this is looking really, really nice. One thing that's important, before I finish the dish, I always taste a little bit, because I wanna make sure if I wanna make some adjustments one way or the other. And for me, I like to be a little spicier, so I'm gonna add just a little bit more spice here. And I would also, depending on how tart you like a dish, you might want to add a little bit more acid, or you may want a little bit more soy sauce. It's all about personal preference at this point, okay? Some sesame seeds are going to go in the dish as well. And now we're going to go ahead and plate it. We've got a nice festive red plate here. Go ahead and just get it on the plate. Garnish it with some more green onions. We'll throw some sesame seeds on here. And then you have it, Szechuan eggplant with ground pork. For more recipes like this, visit us at foodland.com.